What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam and welcome back to another Comically Boston Weekly Nerdy News Monday podcast. And every Monday we discuss the last week in nerddom. And over the last few weeks it wasn't so busy, but last week was a huge week for movie news and nerd stuff. And CinemaCon 2026 was happening over in Vegas, and I have all the updates from that, although I wasn't in the room. So if you want somebody's take of in the room experience, I don't have that. I just have all the little notes and stuff that I grabbed from all the news that was coming out this week from people that were in the room. So we're going to discuss all that. But I also have a few other things to talk about, like Chris Hemsworth put out a couple of set photos for his new movie Cockroach, which seems to be some type of like hitman heist type of film, but he seems to be playing this character named Cockroach, but Cockroach spelled with a K at the beginning. We then have this other picture from set with Chris Hemsworth smoking a cigarette, and he has like these dark shaded glasses on, and he's just such a handsome guy. But I can't wait to see him as Thor in Avengers Doomsday. But also, like earlier this year, he did a little heist film with Halle Berry, Mark Ruffalo, called Crime 101. That wasn't so bad either, you know. So I like to see him doing some other stuff that's not superhero stuff, you know. But also in some other news, over 1,000 major names in Hollywood signed an open letter opposing the Warner Bros. Paramount merger. And this includes names like Denis Villeneuve, J.J. Abrams, Bryan Cranston, Mark Ruffalo, Joaquin Phoenix, Damon Lindelof, Noah Wyle, Glenn Close, Jane Fonda, David Fincher, Ted Danson, and more, right? So you got some people that are big actors, Oscar winners. You got directors in there. You got some TV people in there as well, Noah Wyle, you know. But yeah, so not only is most of the world not liking this Warner Brothers Paramount merger, it seems most of Hollywood is not either. And it just seems like, you know, Netflix Warner Brothers wasn't so bad because it didn't seem like everything was going to change. But those Ellisons over at Paramount, I don't trust them as far as I could fucking throw them, you know? And the Paramount app is so garbage, like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to see that merged with HBO Max at all, even in the slightest, where like Netflix and HBO Max merging together probably would have been okay, but honestly, like, why merge at all? You know, they're just making a monopoly here, and that's kind of what these people are trying to stop. So hopefully that whole merger gets blocked, but, you know, that's above my pay grade either fucking way. But in other news, the Escape from New York movie with Kurt Russell, that I think I've seen Escape from LA, which might have been like a sequel to Escape from New York or something. But also Paddington 4 are in the works at a studio called STUDIOCANAL. And the first instincts I had when I heard Escape from New York reboot, I was like, oh, do this the same way that they're doing Godzilla Legacy of Monsters right now, with Kurt Russell as the older version and Wyatt Russell as the younger version. Do a reboot of Escape from New York with Wyatt Russell, and not only will you have nostalgia fans being like, oh, it's like a baby Kurt doing it all over again. I think he's a great actor, and he's young, and he's like capable, so like, I don't know, that's my pick for an Escape from New York reboot, is get Wyatt Russell to do it and try to pay off some homage in some way, you know what I mean? Another film that I never thought I'd ever see the day of it coming out because it was canceled, but then by popular demand, the Ketchup Company, I believe, bought it from Warner Brothers or something like that. And, you know, they were trying to kill this movie for tax credits, kind of the same way they did Batgirl, but people were like, no, this is good, this should be out. And the movie starring Will Forte, Lana Condor, and John Cena, and this is Coyote versus Acme, and this is coming to theaters August 28th, and this new poster here with the wrecking ball going after the Roadrunner there, or what, the Coyote. And is the Roadrunner who the Coyote's after? I think, right? It's been a long time since I watched any Looney Tunes, but yeah, the world needs stuff like this. You know, it's dumb, it's stupid, but like, yeah, we need some stuff like that every now and again to just shut off the brain and just giggle at some stupidity. But in some more disgruntling news, Marvel Studios has been hit hard by some Disney-announced layoffs. And almost the entire visual effects department, or visual department, were let go. Only a skeleton of full-time crew members remain to coordinate hiring on a per-project basis, right? So they're cutting out everybody, laying off everybody, and then they're just going to hire them when they need them. Like, Disney, you have so much fucking money. Those parks make you so much money every day. These stupid ass Zootopias and shit make you so much fucking money. There is no reason you need to lay off people. If anything, you should give them all bonuses and raises, and people like fucking at the head of the table that are doing nothing, making $300 million, those should be making way fucking less, and you shouldn't be laying off over 1,000 plus people across all divisions. And this is, you know, reported by Forbes, so this is a pretty credible source that Disney's doing a huge layoff, and then a couple days later bragging about how much money their films made at CinemaCon. We'll talk about that more later, but it felt pretty tone deaf. I was like, what the hell, man? I saw this just days before this huge presentation at this panel, like all these people's work probably that they put into these projects that now you're, oh, can't wait to celebrate next year with everybody, and all these people are like, too bad I just got laid off. Like, what the fuck? Fuck you, Disney. But also, in Disney news, because they bought Star Wars Celebration put out a little poster here for the Star Wars Celebration in LA coming in 2027, and I cannot wait for this. The last Star Wars Celebration, I believe, was in 2025, and that was in Japan, and oh, I wanted to go to that so badly, but, you know, I missed the boat. And hopefully 2027, I'll be able to go to that one. You know, I think tickets go on sale pretty soon here in May, and I might have to snag up a couple of those quick, because I'm over here on the East Coast, so if I gotta get tickets, you know, at least I'll have then a year out to plan flights and hotels and how I'm gonna get over there. And, you know, I don't know really how it's set up, you know, I don't know if it's right near hotels and bars and stuff like that. I'm sure it is, but, you know, I'm also thinking, should I drive out from Boston to LA and have a car out there for the week while I'm out there, you know, and be able to drive myself around and not have to get a rental or Ubers or something like that? And would it be more expensive to get to drive out there than just getting an Uber or getting, you know, a rental? I don't know, you know. I guess comment below if you have any advice about that, or anybody that's been to Star Wars Celebration or wants to go themselves. Maybe I'll see you out there in 2027. But now to jump into the CinemaCon 2026 panels. And there was 4 days of this, so it's going to be a chunky bit of news here. But we got day one, Sony, and then we got some DC news and Warner Brother presented on day 2. Day 3 was Universal and Amazon MGM Studios. And then day 4 was Paramount and Disney Plus. And Disney ended with a banger with Marvel Studios and Avengers Doomsday. So that's how we'll close out today's conversations. But just to jump into day 1 in the Sony panel here, they announced a movie called Klara the Sun, based off of a novel of the same name, directed by Taika Waititi, starring Jenna Ortega and Amy Adams, and it follows an artificial friend thrown into a mystery and has vibrant sides and dark sides. And I was just like, little interesting adapted project here from Taika Waititi, but Jenna Ortega and Amy Adams. I was like, okay, Klara the Sun. I haven't necessarily heard of the book or the movie being made, but apparently that's coming from Sony. Okay. They also talked about a Zack Krieger Resident Evil movie. They also talked about a Bloodborne adaptation. Is going to be a rated R animated movie from Jacksepticeye, and that's going to be rated R. And Bloodborne, I haven't necessarily played, but I've heard good things, and I haven't necessarily watched Jacksepticeye himself either, but he's been around and he's been a big person in the gaming industry, and I've been seeing him do more and more like interviews lately for like movies and interviewing maybe just like video game movie type of adaptations, because I feel like the last one I saw him for was like Mario or maybe a Minecraft, I don't know. But Sony also announces that the Legend of Zelda live-action film that they were making has wrapped, and that's coming May 7th, 2027. And then they had Godzilla Minus One director Takashi Yamazaki, and he was on stage talking about his new film Grand Gear, and that's coming February 18th, 2028, and produced by J.J. Abrams. And it looks like a mech fighting mechs film, right? So it's going to be like a Gundam, I think, is like a mech type of, you know, like it's going to be fighting Gundams, I don't know, mech fighting in this movie called Grand Gear from a guy that I know does great visual effects from Godzilla Minus One, and I think he's also doing Godzilla Minus Zero. Takashi, keep it up, brother. He had the options to do whatever he wanted after that first movie, after he won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects for Godzilla film that was entirely Japanese, right? Like, this was pretty much unheard of for this movie to do as good as it did. I think it had like a 3 to 10 $10 million budget and it made, you know, quadruple 20x that or something like that at the theaters. And, you know, we'll talk about it in a minute here, but they also later announced, because this is with Sony, with WB, I think, is who owns the Godzilla -1 stuff in or maybe it is Sony, but maybe it just is in a later panel. They also announced a Helldivers movie that will be an explosive large-scale adaptation starring Jason Momoa and directed by Justin Lin, and that's coming November 10th, 2027. And I believe Momoa and Justin Lin worked together on the Aquaman movies, if I'm not mistaken, so maybe they're reuniting to do a Helldivers movie. And, you know, I don't think Momoa necessarily captures the vibe of that game, but, you know, he's captivating enough that, like, if they put him in the vibe of this game, it should be entertaining. You know, it could be funny, it could be action-packed, it could be sick, it could be like Starship Troopers, but like maybe a legit version of it, you know, a newer version of it, who knows. Sony also introduced The Social Reckoning, a sequel to The Social Network, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin and starring Jeremy Strong as Mark Zuckerberg, Jeremy Allen White and Bill Burr also to star in the film. I was never really a fan of The Social Network back in the day. I mean, I know it had like Jesse Eisenberg and I think Timberlake was in there and Andrew Garfield was in there as well, and like I know it was a good movie that people really loved, but I was never really, you know, here. I'm not really here for Facebook or Zuckerberg in general. So, you know, I don't know if I'll watch that type of film, but I'll probably, knowing me, I'll at least check it out for the one time. But then Sony had Spider-Man Brand New Day on stage, showing an extended look at a scene, and I have new posters that came out with the Spider-Man mask and the raised webbing, and Zendaya's in one eye, and you can't really tell what's in the other eye, maybe just New York skyline, but quite interesting, this movie and what we've seen from it so far. And this other poster, him diving towards the hand, and, you know, maybe there will be 2 other people on this poster eventually as well. I don't know. You know, maybe Sony's doing that thing where they edit superheroes out of their trailers again, like they did for No Way Home. And Eric Voss from New Rockstars was in the room there at CinemaCon in Vegas, and he has a scene description for Spider-Man Brand New Day's footage that was shown here in the room, and he says that it begins with Peter seeing Ned in a bodega, and Peter hangs up on the phone and watches as Ned buys 2 mini kegs of Green Jackal beer, which many people think this is an Easter egg for the Jackal who might show up in this film. Peter then follows Ned across the street into an apartment party, and in the party, no one knows who Peter is, but a stranger gives him a beer cup. Peter then goes into Ned's room and finds his Chewbacca Lego figurine. So maybe somewhere deep down inside, Ned still has that memory of his buddy that he used to be best friends with. But then Peter sees on Ned's research wall, there are headlines about a parkour prodigy and a skyscraper squatter arrested for the 8th time. So maybe he thinks these are people that are Spider-Man. But I also just love how parkour prodigy is pretty similar to Peter Parker. Parkour. You know, so maybe Parker prodigy. Peter then meets Ned, who tells him about a spider tracker app that he invented to help him track down the identity of Spider-Man. And Ned says he narrowed it down to 2 people: Flash, Eugene Thompson, who we know from the other films, and the teacher with the nerdy glasses, Mr. Harrington. And he's like, if you knew him, this is crazy. And he goes, oh, I'm sure. And then Zendaya as MJ comes in and makes her friendly neighbor comment that we saw in one of the previous trailers. And then we find out that MJ has a new boyfriend played by Iman Esfandi, Ezra Bridger from Ahsoka. And Peter sadly watches them kiss, which has to be even weirder watching friggin' your wife make out in this scene to somebody else, and Tom Holland sitting there like, hey motherfucker, watch your hands, I see you. You know? But then also, Ned asks MJ about a job she interviewed for, and she got the job but turned it down, saying they are a soulless corporation. maybe Oscorp, maybe Roxxon. I think maybe Roxxon could be a connection maybe to like Daredevil, and then like the Hand in like a weird connection way, a little thread there that could be tied together. I don't know. But she clearly has a new boyfriend. They're back from college, I believe, so this is going to be 4 years later, so they're not going to be set in Boston, which hurts my feelings, but it is what it is. This is going to be now after their college experience, and maybe they moved back to New York with now these new college friends and a new college boyfriend. Either way, hopefully MJ's happy. And then the Spider-Verse producers, Lord and Miller, I believe, were on stage and talking about Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, and they say that it's going to be the most emotional Spider-Verse movie we've ever made. We are going places that we literally could not have gone before. So what does that mean? Like, they were restricted in the last movies, that they were getting notes from above saying, hey, don't do that, they're doing that somewhere else type of shit, and now they're kind of free to end the story however they want? Because I think this is going to be the end of this Miles story, because they can't use Miles in the MCU until this animated series is over, right? So I think after now Project Hail Mary, Lord and Miller are heading over to start really crunching numbers and working on Beyond the Spider-Verse. Brandon Davis, BD, over from Phase Hero and the BD, main character podcast, he was also in the room over at CinemaCon, and he says that the footage that was playing at CinemaCon was in 1.43 aspect ratio, as they are making the movie formatted for premium large formats or IMAX screens, so you should be able to see this film on the biggest screen possible. And context is picking up where the last movie left off, and Miles is looking for allies, even having to face himself. Welcome to the final chapter of Miles' story, as they say on stage. And we hear in the footage Miles saying, there is no Spider-Man here, before being captured by the Prowler from the other dimension, his other Uncle Aaron. And it's picking up right where that final scene left off. And Uncle Aaron tells him he's not the Prowler, before alternate Miles entering, saying, who are you? I'm Miles Morales, but you can call me Prowler. And Miles tells him he needs to let him go, and he's like, why would I do that? Tell me who you are. And he says, I'm Miles Morales. And they break into a funny banter about how to pronounce Morales, or I don't even know how you would alternately pronounce it, but I'll guess we'll see when the trailer drops. Our Miles then explains canon events, in that his dad is going to die, and he tells him about different canon events and about Spider-Man, and Aaron thinks the concept is ridiculous. Miles starts glitching, and everyone backs up. Our Miles says, I don't want to hurt you. You know what they say. Don't watch the mouth, watch the hands. And this is obviously when he's tied up to that punching bag. This is the same thing that Peter B. Parker did to Miles in the first Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And then they got a one last time montage of unfinished footage. A car jumps a drawbridge. Miles fights with the sandbag still tied to his back. And then they hear a quote, you always gotta make a choice, Miles, and the choice makes you. And this is a Peter B. And then they see Peter B, Spider-Ham, Gwen seems to be primed for a fight. Punk questions Miles, thinking he could take down Miguel's whole gang. So obviously Spider-Punk's back, Spider-Ham, Peter B, Spider-Gwen's also going to be back for this movie. And then he writes that the screen is vertically split by different universes in the different Spider-Man characters at the bottom of the panels looking at their cities, which has to be just a sick shot. But this is apparently still coming June 18th, 2027, and he says can't get here soon enough. Ooh. Can't wait to see more of this. Eric Voss from New Rockstars also had to add about the Beyond the Spider-Verse footage. He said that it followed an intense montage that showed all of the returning characters from across the Spider-Verse in an epic battle against the Spot in Miguel O'Hara. Wait, so Miguel O'Hara is going to turn bad and go against them? Or is Miguel just trying to catch Miles, and then at the same time Miles is trying to stop the Spot? So then it's kind of like a three-way fight of this guy trying to stop them, and then them trying to stop the bad guy? I don't know, but either way, he also writes that the Kingpin also made an appearance in this montage. So maybe the Kingpin from Earth 42, because obviously the Kingpin died in Miles' universe, so Multiverse, though, Kingpin must also be out there somewhere else, and this animated Kingpin was super big, you know, like, not no Vincent D'Onofrio, he's a big old large boy. But some of the pictures from this, like some of them we've seen like miles and miles in this like weirdly painted, watercolored like planet. And then we saw some new photos of, it looks like a young Uncle Aaron with dreads and a young Jefferson Davis type of thing. Or Jefferson Morales, I think, in this universe. You see a shot of Spider-Punk saying, "Gonna save your dad," as he like, you know, is rocking out or something. Or just being the coolest character ever. And then it looks like this weird black and white shot of what has to be maybe Spot that took over Miguel. Ooh, no, what am I looking at here? Unless that's the Spot just trying to be like, oh, I can make myself look like a spider suit too and be all cool. Screw you, bub. You know, and then we see a shot of this pretty shot of Miles and his dad touching foreheads. And yeah, you know his dad's gonna die in this final movie and it's gonna be super emotional. It's gonna break all of our hearts. See, I told you this is a big news week. We're still on the Sony panel. But they then had Dwayne Johnson, Jack Black, and Kevin Hart on stage to talk about the new Jumanji. And they were all joking around. And DJ's asking if the alcohol kicked in yet. And Kevin says he's drunk as shit. And DJ tries to call out some theater employees specifically, but says, "I can't see shit and I'm a little drunk." Right, so of course they're being funny on stage. But Jack Black gets it back on track and they acknowledge Karen Gillan couldn't make it today. Hart shares his excitement and adds to it being on behalf of all three on stage. Like, but you know that they're just like drunk as a skunk on stage being funny. But then DJ said, "We're all lucky to do a lot of things that we love. Now we're back 8 years later." Jack Black says it's his favorite of these movies yet. They all start bantering on stage until Kevin Hart says, "I didn't have a good time. It was work, showing up, seeing this stupid fucking face every day." You know, probably talking about DJ, and DJ adds in, "If I gotta see one more picture of Kevin Hart's fucking golf game." Right, like, they definitely had a little bit too much to drink before getting on stage. But they also acknowledged the writer-director Jake Kasdan, who I believe has done the last two films as well. And I think he's done actually a pretty damn good job of the Jumanji franchise here. And they acknowledge that there's an Easter egg in this movie that, you know, is in every scene that is an Easter egg for Robin Williams, the man who started it all with the first Jumanji. And they announced that the title is going to be Jumanji Open World, and this is coming December of this year in 2026. I think right after Avengers Doomsday and Dune Part 3. So it was originally set to come out right before, but they just wrapped filming in Hawaii, it seems. But yeah, just it would have been real funny to be in the room watching them all shit on each other, and you know, that was what ended up ending Sony's panel too, was Jumanji the Open World. BD then described the footage that they saw, and Lamorne Morris is going to be in this film as a handyman who discovers the old video game console in a basement. Danny DeVito is then shocked to see Dr. Bravestone in Nona's, the restaurant I believe after the second film, a video game character now in their real world. This time Bravestone is speaking with an overly sexy Latino accent and says, "Of course, you know, because of my charisma, CZ." The characters and animals are in the real world and they're stuck in demo mode. Bravestone and Ruby broke up. Jack Black's character realizes they're not in Jumanji. The guide wishes them luck and races off. Bravestone claims the fate of Jumanji in his hands, but Kevin Hart's character argues with him and they go on a banter in Spanish. It's pretty damn funny. Rhinos, lizards, animals, and all kinds of stuff in this world. ATVs and two-wheelers and all kinds of adventures ensue in a ton of terrains ranging from snow to lush sunny worlds and more. Bravestone invites his enemies to try and stop him, hits the people's eyebrow, of course, he's got a smolder. The trailer then ends with them back in the game and the original players are inhabiting the characters as video game skins. So Jumanji Open World, I really liked the first two. I mean, what, Jumanji Into the Jungle and the Jumanji, the next level. And I haven't seen the Robin Williams one in a long time, but it sounds pretty interesting. Like they're bringing the characters from the game into the real world, and then it sounds like maybe the real world people get sucked into the game again, and then they, have to get out as the video game characters, have to figure out how to get back in. But Jumanji open world, and hopefully it's not as bad as Tron Ares, bringing the video game to the open world. Hopefully Jumanji does it a little bit better. Now, I don't know if this was at the end of the Sony panel or maybe the start of the Warner Brothers panel for like day 2, but I did see a bunch of reports going around for Godzilla Minus Zero, and that, these images of Godzilla looking absolutely crazy, and the 2 stars from Godzilla Minus One apparently will both return for this film as well. And Eric Voss had to say in the room that Gen Z attendance to movie theaters increased 25% in the past year. Over a quarter of more people are going to the theaters from last year to the year before. Like, that's crazy. But then he says that Godzilla Minus Zero just showed a teaser footage at CinemaCon that showed Godzilla stomping past the Statue of Liberty. No curious glance like the one given by Galactus, but, marching as a kaiju past friggin' New York Statue of Liberty, unless it's the one in, France or something. But either way, like, he was in Japan in that whole first movie, so maybe he's heading to some other major cities in the world. Uh-oh, Godzilla Minus Zero, gonna be dangerous. But this film is coming November 3rd of 2026, so this should be coming later this year and shot for IMAX from that same director as the first one, and hopefully they're just gonna be able to do more and more, because the budget for the second film should have been expensive, like the first one they did for real cheap. I hope they gave him a blank check for the second one. But so far, the details we know about Godzilla Minus Zero, set 2 years after the first film, first Japanese project filmed for IMAX. The 2 stars from the previous film will reprise their roles, and it looks like Godzilla is going to New York. And some of the images of Godzilla, like, he looks so much beefier in this new trailer with like extra spikes on his shoulders, and he has grown quite a bit since we first saw him in Godzilla Minus One. But I have the little teaser trailer here. It's only about 45 seconds. So why don't we take a quick peek here at Godzilla Minus Zero? Shit, November 3rd, as he just fucking walks past the Statue of fucking Liberty. Now, like, I'm pretty sure the Statue of Liberty's in the ocean. Is it not? Over in the bay, at least, in a body of water in New York. So if Godzilla's just stomping through, he's so tall that his legs go all the way to the bottom of that body of water, and he's just kind of strutting through like, excuse me, pardon me, where's that Empire State Building? Is King Kong around? I'd like to shoot him with a laser blast. Like, I don't know what Godzilla's up to, but I love him. But then sliding into day 2 of CinemaCon with the Warner Brothers news, and some other DC news came out, and that was that Sydney Chandler from Alien Earth and Kyle Chandler's daughter has been cast as Nosferatu in Creature Commandos Season 2, so maybe that's just going to be an animated character, but she confirmed it herself on her IG story, and it looks like Eric Frankenstein, The Bride, Weasel, Dr. Phosphorus, G.I. Robot, Rick Flag, and Nina Mazursky, who won't be back for Season 2, I don't believe. So maybe they're replacing that character with the Nosferatu, and that's going to be who Sydney Chandler is. Interesting. It was also confirmed that Adria Arjona is been cast in Man of Tomorrow, and the rumors now have not exactly been confirmed who she's playing. A couple of outlets said that she's going to be playing Maxima, but that may not be correct. She could be playing Maxima, she could be playing maybe like a different woman entirely, she could be playing Wonder Woman is what a lot of people have fan cast her as, but either way, Adria Arjona dating Jason Momoa, good to see her just in the in the DCU now with James Gunn, and I believe she's worked with James Gunn before, so yeah, good to see an old pairing back together, and she's drop dead gorgeous. So whether she's Maxima or, which I believe is a character with big long red hair and curly, and she's like a love interest to Superman type of thing, so maybe that will cause some beef with Lois Lane in this movie. Or she's Wonder Woman and she'll be a new fixture to this Justice League going forward. But starting out the Warner Brothers panel, Pam Abdy and Mike DeLuca were on stage saying we have a lot to celebrate. And then Patton Oswalt came out to host the event, jokingly pitching himself as DC villain Mr. Mxyzptlk, or Toys Maker. And James Gunn, he's like, I know, James Gunn, I know you've gotten my text. Text me back. Patton goes on to say that he's watched 117 movies in theaters last year. Those huge numbers. I only watched like 20. So 117. I thought 20 was a lot. And it is a lot. 117 times to the theaters to see movies. I am jealous. Also, like, that's like some Jamie Dirac numbers. If you know, you know. Warner Brothers then announced that they are launching a branch division called Clockwork, which I think will focus on like alternate, foreign language maybe type films, or maybe just stuff that's like not exactly Warner Brothers stuff. They're like, okay, this will be a Clockwork picture. And their first movie under this label will be Te Amo. And this is coming from Oscar-winning director Sean Baker, who just won a couple years ago for Anora. So this is his next thing. And originality is not risky. Derivative sameness is, right? So you gotta be original. That's not the risk, right? Doing something new is not risky. Doing the same thing over and over and over again is risky. WB then said that they are aiming to release 18 movies in 2028, and they want to take swings at original movies and continue with franchises and launch new IPs. Co-CEOs of Warner Brothers, Pam Abdy and Mike DeLuca, are touting their successes of 2025s with films like Sinners, One Battle After Another, and Weapons. And DeLuca says that WB released 11 films in 2025 and plan to release 14 in 2026 and 18 in 2027. So just ramping up production at these studios, but also like Warner Brothers with that Paramount merger, they're also like, hey, we're still looking to put out 18 films, so get off our back maybe a little bit, but people are still not happy about that Paramount shit. And then Warner Brothers kicked right into a sizzle reel, and some of the footage shown in this were for past movies like Sinners, One Battle, F1, Superman, Minecraft, and more. And it highlighted One Battle for its Best Picture win before showing the more recent and upcoming movies: Wuthering Heights, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, Digger, Supergirl, Dune Part 3, Mortal Kombat 2, Dr. Seuss, and more. They also saw a new shot of Lobo smiling towards camera and snarkily waving. And WB's co-CEOs just thanked theater owners for standing strong during the chicken jockey popcorn explosions. They probably should apologize for that as well. But how could they have known that that was what was going to happen to the chicken jockey, and it was going to be this viral thing? Just crazy. Eric Voss then has a little description of what he saw from the Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum, as they showed a brief preview scene at CinemaCon using footage of Gollum from the Fellowship prologue, and new audio from Andy Serkis as Gollum whispers to the One Ring, "It's a tale that must never be told," coming December 2027. Ooh. And we'll find out some more about Lord of the Rings in a minute. But there was also a little video sent in by James Gunn, Nicholas Hoult, and David Cornsweet on the set of Man of Tomorrow, saying that they are trying to save the world with your sworn enemy and a new villain and an unlikely alliance. So Hoult, Lex Luthor, and Superman have to team up together to defeat Brainiac in this film. That should be really exciting. And, James Gunn says he's excited to share more when he can, but they will be filming next week, or now that I'm recording this, they should start filming today or this week at some point. But WB also announced Godzilla x Kong, the next in the, so we saw some Toho Japanese, Godzilla. Now the American version of Godzilla with the Godzilla versus Kong bullshit that's been going on. Their next version of this, where they're coming off of Godzilla Kong, the New Empire. This is now going to be Godzilla Kong Supernova, coming in 2027, so I'm excited for that. And I've also been watching Monarch Legacy of the Monsters right now, and that's also been great. Just some more Godzilla and Kong stuff and monster stuff, which, if you're a big fan of that Monsterverse and the American Godzilla, go check out the Apple TV Plus fucking Monarch Legacy of the Monsters. It's pretty damn good. Sam Raimi then introduced Evil Dead Wrath with a short video, and he promises the Book of the Dead will unleash dark spirits to possess the living and proclaim it will be the year's most terrifying experience in 2027. Interesting. Melissa McCarthy is also a animated Christmas movie titled Margie, and she plays the titular character, and it's a story of having to work with reindeer to try and find Santa and save Christmas, arriving holiday 2027. So Melissa McCarthy out there doing a little Christmas movie. Love to see it. Margot Robbie then sent in a video discussing the new Oceans movie, which I was very much so thinking that the new Oceans movie was still with, you know, Brad Pitt and George Clooney and all that. But apparently at the moment it says that it is set in 1962 and follows a heist at the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, you know, they never necessarily said exactly when the previous movies were set, but they seem to be set in the modern day, and then with like Ocean's 8, with like the women crew, and they robbed the Met, that seemed like, you know, more recently as well. So, you know, if they're going to go back to the 60s with Margot Robbie, maybe there's going to be two different Oceans movies, and there's going to be like an Ocean with Margot Robbie, and there's going to be an Oceans with, you know, Ocean's 14 with the original crew, Matt Damon, Brad Pitt, and George Clooney. You know, like that seems much more what I want to see. But, you know, Monaco Grand Prix robbing it in 1962 also sounds kind of cool. So, I don't know. I'm here for it, I guess. But then Tom Cruise and Alejandro Inarritu, I think I said that right, got a standing ovation at CinemaCon as they introduced 2026's movie Digger, which I really don't know much about. But the cast of Digger includes Tom Cruise, John Goodman, Jesse Plemons, Riz Ahmed, and Sandra Hüller. The director Alejandro says he started thinking about the idea of Digger in 2017 and then began talking to Tom Cruise in 2019 while Cruise was making Top Gun Maverick. And Inarritu calls Cruise's character Digger Rockwell, so obviously Digger is named after this character, and he calls him fearless, but also that this role could be the most challenging for Tom Cruise. Interesting. He also says that they shot Digger in VistaVision, which is like a special camera, so that's kind of interesting as well. The new Rockstar's Eric Voss seeing the footage of Digger, and he wrote that the film tells a story of Digger Rockwell, an oil baron whose drilling on an ice shelf of Greenland causes the breaking of massive icebergs that threaten billions of lives worldwide. John Goodman plays the U.S. president who tasks Rockwell to fix the crisis that escalates into a global nuclear war. What the hell? The film looks incredible. Think Doctor Strangelove meets Birdman meets Don't Look Up meets The Death of Stalin is what Voss says. Ooh, so from that little description there, that's the first I'm hearing about what this movie's about. So he's like up drilling for oil on this ice shelf in Greenland, and it breaks, causing massive icebergs to go out into the ocean, I'm guessing, and it threatens billions of lives, and then ends up in a World War nuclear crisis. Like, okay. Like, whoa. So I wasn't necessarily thinking that this Digger movie was going to be something that I'm interested in, but now I can't wait to see this trailer with my own eyes and see what this is about, you know? Like, it's kind of confusing, but it's also kind of fascinating. I'm like, what's going on here? It was also thrown in here at some point that Keanu Reeves shot a video in the middle of a body of water floating on some kind of board on the set of Shiver. It's a 2027 movie directed by Tim Miller, and he says that I get eaten by a lot of sharks. A lot of fucking sharks, Keanu Reeves says. So, interesting there as well. Warner Brothers then showed footage for The End of Oak Street, which is going to be starring, I believe, Ewan McGregor and Anne Hathaway. And it looks like new shots of a T-Rex chasing the family across suburban front lawns. So yeah, it's like a family got sent back to prehistoric times and they have to survive with dinosaurs. So like, you know, for the dinosaur people it should be interesting, but like maybe this is going to be much more of like a horror movie than, you know, an adventure. You know what I mean? Like it looks pretty scary from the one little teaser look I saw at it. They then talked about The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum, and this new picture got released of obviously Andy Serkis, who I believe is like writing and directing this movie as well as starring as Gollum and Schmeagol. But Ian McKellen returns as Gandalf. Kate Winslet will return, I believe, or maybe a new character, Marigold. Lou Woodall is a Halvard. so almost Harvard, but with an L, Halvard, and that's a new character. Elijah Wood will return as Frodo. Lee Pace returning as Thranduil from the Hobbit movies, I believe. And then Jamie Dornan is going to be replacing Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn, I think is his real name, but Strider for people that know, that's also his like nickname there. And I was sad to hear that Viggo Mortensen wasn't coming back, but he's probably up there in age himself. And then the image side by side that I saw of Jamie Dornan and him in like the same outfit and haircut, I was like, alright, Jamie Dornan's gonna absolutely crush it as this character. But then DC Studios hit the stage and Clayface was first up, and the logo takes the screen, and it's like red logo, and a riveting horror film from director James Watkins, Safran says, and saying it emphasizes the studio's interest in character rather than genre, right? Like they want character movies that are going to stand alone on their own rather than trying to make a, you know, a superhero blockbuster, right? Like they're focused on character and script, you know, like I'm very happy with what I've seen from DC Studios. But, you know, it did feel like this panel was a little light for them, you know, and a little less pizzazz than they might have had if James Gunn was there, but obviously he's busy on set of Man of Tomorrow getting ready to film that. But, you know, could have had a little bit more pizzazz from this panel is what I was hearing from the folks that were there. But the DC Studios Clayface trailer is described as brutal, as the flaming lips "Do you realize" echoes over Tom Rhys-Harry's as actor Matt Hagen, who due to a facial injury is now sitting in a bed with one wide open eye glaring out from under bandages. Quick shots cut in to show his glamorous actor life before the injury. Lots of body horror, blades pressed against faces, sprinting past Gotham police. The teaser ends with Matt lying naked, curled up in a bathtub, staring blankly upward, and then he runs his hand down his face and smears his clay-like skin. Ooh, so like, it's gonna be a horror movie, but it's also around Halloween time, which I really appreciate. But like, Clayface seems creepy as fuck, but like, I'm kind of really here for this description, and I can't wait to see the trailer for this. And then Superman hit the stage, and Millie Alcock had on a Supergirl sweater that was like a S shield, like the normal Superman logo, but it was Coco Chanel, and it was like the stylized shirt, but it was also like a Supergirl shirt, and it was kind of cool. Maybe they'll be selling those as merch for the Supergirl movie. Probably not, but maybe. But also, who do you think would win in a fight, Aquaman or Lobo, considering they're the same character? And I think this was asked to Jason Momoa, and I think they'd have one look at each other and have a few hundred beers and be like, I like this guy. We should make a movie together, is what Jason Momoa says. Imagine a movie now with Aquaman from the previous DCU and Lobo on screen together the whole time. I would die laughing just how like complicated that would be to have Momoa and Momoa talking at the same time, but in those two very different characters. You know, like one you'd have to put on this bucket of makeup, one he'd have to put on this like scaly super suit and have his fucking tattoos and his trident, you know, like super cool. And Safran joked on stage that Aquaman Lobo movie will be coming to theaters 2031, but definitely just a joke. But it was also kind of funny that Momoa rode out on stage on the Space Hog, which, you know, he looks happy as can be to be riding that friggin' thing. And I believe that shows up in the movie itself as well. But there wasn't so many photos from this event, right? Like most of the events, they weren't allowed to take photos at all, or they were being shamed by this like green laser light, which is crazy. But luckily with like the last day with Disney, there is a little bit more photos. So I'm sorry that this has been mostly me chatting the whole time, but I hope you guys are getting some information out of this either way. But they had Millie Alcock on stage trying to sell this movie, and they're like, what was your favorite part? And they're like, everything was fun, you know? And she's like, people will see it in cinemas and be like, thank fuck I saw it in the cinema. And Millie Alcock says of Supergirl, right? Like, she's just not good in these public events, but she is like a character and she has charisma, but like it's just like who she is as a person, right? Like she doesn't want to be in front of these big crowds or whatever, selling, or even at press doing these things. Like, it doesn't seem like her vibe necessarily. So she struggles with that side of things. So some people say that it's messing with the marketing for this movie. I don't know. I think Millie Alcock's great, and I really want to see what her and Lobo and what director Craig Gillespie were up to over there with this, you know, movie. And Gillespie was on stage and praised Alcock for speaking Kryptonian in like this ridiculous accent that's not real, so she's got to say these lines as if they were real, but it's completely made up, and she has to do these stunts that she had to often learn day of. They then showed some Supergirl footage to the CinemaCon crowd. The scene shows Supergirl on a transport ship leaving Ruthie's homeworld, and Kara gives a nearby bong-smoking alien some gum to chew, and they see Ruthie is in an argument with an alien fare collector for accidentally insulting them. Kara had left Ruthie behind to look after a wounded Crypto, but Ruthie decided to join in the vengeance quest against Krim. The ship is raided by tech pirates with teleporters. Interesting. They steal Kara's pocket watch and Ruthie's sword. Kara has snatched one of the teleporting bracelets and uses it to fight the raiders. Ooh, so she's gonna be like teleporting. And at one point accidentally teleports inside a large alien and has to crawl out. Ew. Okay, kind of funny, but kind of interesting still. Ultimately, in this trailer, Kara is trapped in an airlock and she tells the pilots to fly closer to a nearby yellow sun, and Kara puts on a spacesuit to try to float out closer to it, but the pirate captain blows her out the airlock. Luckily, her frozen body gets enveloped in sunlight and her powers return. Kara rips all the grappling bots off the transport ship, but now the pirate ship blasts her into a ship's debris field, and Kara uses her heat vision to fight back. And she rips off the engines of the pirate ship, but does not kill them. So just kind of rips their engines off and leaves them just to float out in space, kind of like how she was left to freeze to death in space unless that sun saw her. You know, so they're very interesting here. Like, I want to see more of this Supergirl movie, but I've also kind of seen enough. You know, I'm ready for this movie. You know, some people aren't, but I'm totally here for it, and if it's a part of James Gunn's DCU, I need to see it, you know? So I don't know about y'all, comment below your thoughts on Supergirl. And then after that Supergirl scene, it was followed by an expanded trailer montage. Among the new shots are images of Kara and Crypto being loaded into a spherical escape pod by Zor-El to leave the doomed floating Argo City, and a new shot of Superman from Kara's perspective in the moment she arrives on Earth as he opens the pod and greets his cousin with, "Hi there." You know, like, so it does look like David Cornsweet will be in this film, maybe in a couple little cameo scenes, I hope, but maybe in a bigger role than we think. But it does feel like this movie will be going to multiple different planets and not necessarily being set in, you know, Metropolis. But then after the Supergirl panel, there was a little panel for Practical Magic 2 with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman on stage. They then saw some shots of J.J. Abrams' The Great Beyond, and that seems like a classic J.J. mystery box trailer type of thing, and some people describing it as weird, but interesting still. And apparently Ortega, maybe Jenna Ortega's in that one as well. And then they showed a flashing montage of Doom Part 3 at CinemaCon, and posters across the screen while the new musical score blasts. The light comes up to reveal Fremen lining the stage. It ends with two of them floating up to the ceiling as Denis Villeneuve takes stage with a big applause. So they had, like, you know, Fremen and guys attached to wires doing this whole, like, presentation just for these people in the room. That's kind of cool. But then the folks in the room got to see Denis Villeneuve come on stage, and he wanted to do something new with Dune Part 3, he says. And he says that the first movies were like one movie split into two. Part 3 will be more intense and more emotional and more of a war movie. Jason Momoa, Zendaya, and Timothée Chalamet are all on stage too. Zendaya on stage says that Chani's youthful outlook is completely gone in Dune Part 3, and then Chalamet adds that in Dune Part 3, Paul Atreides has become his own worst vision. His character has become the all-powerful Dark Emperor of the universe. His focus now is only to protect the people he loves. Denis was then asked about the film being set 17 years. There will be a 17-year time jump from this movie to the last movie. And speaking on this, he says, it's a very different world, he says. All of his nightmares, dreams come to truth, came to reality, which means Paul is dealing with consequences, dealing with his actions. So very heady for Paul in this movie. And it is more of a redemption story, and still the heartbeat of the film is the love story between Chani and Paul. It's a broken love story, but still, it's the heart of the movie. You know, You know, so maybe they end up back together by the end of this movie, or maybe like Chani has to kill Paul to stop him from destroying the universe, or I don't know. But if you guys aren't fans of the first 2 Dune movies, I am not a fan of you, because the first one's slow, but it's also just kind of like setting the tone. But like he said, it's also a part 1 of a part 2 movie, you know? But then Dune Part 2 is such a fucking incredible movie that blew my mind, like visually, acting, all across the board. Some of, if not the most exciting films I've seen in theaters ever. Chalamet likens the Dune trilogy with the Lord of the Rings trilogy for this generation, when the movie theaters need an experience, you know? And Jason Momoa reveals how his character of Duncan Idaho is back from Dune Part 3. I am sent a gift to Paul to see how he handles someone he hasn't seen. He explains, I am Hate now, which book readers know as a resurrected clone of Duncan. He goes, I'm a different guy though, Momoa concluded. Oh, so he's not exactly Duncan Idaho, but he is this clone of Duncan Idaho named Hate. H-A-Y-T, Hate, or Hyatt, whatever they're going to call him. But either way, Momoa back for 3, and I can't wait just to see how Hate sees Paul Atreides and what he looks at him like. Duncan? My guy? My buddy? My dude? You know, and then he's back and he's going to be fighting him or something? I don't know. But it sounds like the people in the room also got to see the opening scenes of Dune Part 3. And Eric Voss wrote that the opening scene of Dune Part 3 is epic. The Fremen soldiers led by Stilgar invade a rainy world. Water will fall from the sky. One of the Fremen reads from their prayer book referring to the prophecy foretold from Arrakis, or for Arrakis, and there's some Saving Private Ryan-esque tension as the Fremen box-shaped landing craft descends, and there's a notable focus on a crate carried by 4 soldiers. So maybe this is Hyatt or Hate in this box. At first, there's no resistance, but then a gun turret pops out of the mud and blasts several of the landing craft and soldiers. Then a giant seed-shaped structure rises out of the mud and uses 4 to 5 of these turrets to blast the crap out of the Fremen invasion force. Stilgar calls in the structure's location for an aerial bombing, but the structure is shielded. Stilgar tries to use a shield-piercing device, but the piercer bounces off of it and hits their own forces. One of the crate carriers freaks out and bolts, so they probably dropped this crate that's something important. The sound design, editing, visual effects, and production design are top-notch, and he ends by saying, seriously, this is our generation's Lord of the Ring trilogy. Hook Dune Part 3 into my veins. I 100% agree, Eric Voss. Just reading his description gave me chill bumps. Like, I am so excited to see more of this. And it's still crazy that, you know, they held strong that Dune Part 3 and Avengers Doomsday are still both coming out on the same day. You know, they didn't move their dates. But then the Warner Brothers panel ended as they presented a slate of movies coming in 2027 and beyond. And they are Animal Friends, Remain, Panic Carefully, Godzilla x Kong Supernova, the untitled Fast and the Furious film, which some people are saying is Fast Forever, but they didn't show anything here, Bad Fairies, Man of Tomorrow, the Minecraft sequel, Shiver, The Conjuring First Communion, The Batman Part 2, hype for that, Margie Claus, that was with Melissa McCarthy there, Gremlins is going to be coming back, The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum, the Oceans prequel film, a Nancy Meyers film, Ti Amo, Oh the Places You'll Go, Dynamic Duo, Hello Kitty, The Lunar Chronicles, Final Destination 7, The Revenge of La Lenora, okay, Evil Dead Wrath, a Baz Luhrmann film, Gladys, The Flood, and they ended by saying Game of Thrones, AEGONS, Conquest, and more to come. So, so to me, the most interesting one is, of course, the Game of Thrones announcing that AEGONS Conquest will be a film coming as soon as 2027, possibly 2028, but like 2020, next year, Aegon Conquest, I'm totally here for this. As much as I want to see, you know, just like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon or Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, I would want to see a show for Aegon's Conquest. I mean, shit, imagine a trilogy of movies of Aegon's Conquest. Oh. Oh, that sounds so awesome though. And I just really want to see Balerion the Black Dread. And it makes sense that they're like, listen, if we're going to do Balerion the Black Dread and the biggest dragon ever, we have to use an IMAX screen. You know, we need the biggest friggin' thing we can possibly film. CinemaCon Day 3 then opened with Universal, followed by Amazon MGM, and Snoop Dogg opened up the panel, and he walked out to drop it like it's hot, and he's like hosting the beginning of this whole thing, and it just is funny as hell that like that Snoop Dogg is in the room, and one of the guys, Brandon Davis, was like, it's a shame that we can't record this right now. Like, why wouldn't they be able to record Snoop Dogg on stage? It's not like they were showing anything else, you know. So maybe stuff like this by day 3 or by day 4, they were like, okay, maybe we can let them film some stuff in the room, or at least Marvel and Disney were like, film, we want people to know what's happening in this room, but don't film the trailers, right? So any of the special looks at things, they weren't allowed to film, but they were day 4 starting to be able to take photos. But man, oh man, I would have loved to seen footage of Snoop Dogg out on stage doing his thing. But apparently there will be a Snoop Dogg biopic released in theaters next year, and he says, my movie gonna be rated R, you can believe that. You know, and I believe him, you know. And Snoop Dogg's story is nuts. So like the Murder, She Wrote case and whatnot, like, unless they dramatize it to be even crazier, which I don't think they'll need to, Snoop Dogg's story is going to be nuts. But Snoop is producing his biopic, and he's doing this with Universal and Brian Grazer in the style of Straight Outta Compton, kind of like how that was done. And it says that Jonathan Davies, who I don't think I know by name at least, maybe I'll recognize his face, but it says that Jonathan Davies will play the younger version of the music legend. So Snoop Dogg's already found the person to play him for this biopic. So maybe this is legit. I thought it was maybe just like something for fruition, you know. But Snoop Dogg biopic coming soon. What will they call it? Just Snoop Dogg? Maybe. Probably. But Universal decided to jump right on into things, and they kicked off with Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, and they got a standing ovation on the way out, and they saw like a little snippets of film rolls and stuff that was set to Ludwig Göransson's score of Oppenheimer and transitioned into Hans Zimmer's time theme from Inception, right? So showing like a cinematic cut of Christopher Nolan films. Christopher Nolan then had to say that The Odyssey is a story that has entertained audiences for 3,000 years, and how he has dreamed to tell an epic legend on large-scale film. Starting with The Dark Knight, he's been trying to film larger and larger portions of movies on IMAX, and for the first time with The Odyssey, 100% of the film was shot on IMAX. And that said, he's also editing it in other formats and promises The Odyssey will play on all screens and still be the largest, sharpest film in the theater, which is definitely true. Like, as far as like Coogler and Christopher Nolan, the actual cameras and the way that the film looks is so important to them. Like, even more so, I think, than the story, right? Like, they want their films to look as good as the stories are, you know? Which I always appreciate as somebody that loves the visuals in a movie theater. But they showed footage of The Odyssey, and it's described as Odysseus, Matt Damon's character, washes up on an island of Calypso. Charlize Theron is in the debris of a broken ship, and he says that he has no memory of anything before Troy. Do I have a son? How old is he now? Ooh, so, you know, he's gonna forget some things, and he's gonna have, like, brain damage or something? I don't know. Concussion? But we cut to the feast of Menelaus, which is John Bernthal's character, and Helen seated beside him as he calls Odysseus' son Telemachus, Tom Holland, to come sit beside him. And it looks like Bernthal asks him, do you know the story of the horse? And Tom Holland's character says yes. And Bernthal asks him, do you know it from the inside, right? Ooh, and then they cut to the Trojan Horse preview footage shown in front of screenings of One Battle After Another. And this Dolby screen is not IMAX, but it looks incredible. Lots of cool forces, perspectives, miniatures used to make the horse look huge, and the Trojan slaves hauling it up. The sand looks massive and real. There's a giant shot where saw in other footage of the Trojan stabbing the horse through the wood and one soldier getting stabbed in the shoulder while the other Greeks stifle his yelp, right? So all the people on the inside of the Trojan horse, as they're stabbing into it, one guy gets hit and he goes to like scream and everyone else has to like keep them quiet so they don't get, you know, discovered inside the Trojan horse. Odysseus and Menelaus lead the other Greeks out of the horse and sneak around Troy, killing guards and rushing to get the gates open while the duel in a volley with Trojan archers. Eventually they get the gates open and heavily armored Agamemnon marches in, leading hundreds more Greeks to sack the city. The editing and action are tense, Zero Dark 30 in sandals, as Eric Voss describes it. I really like Matt Damon's casting there as Odysseus too. Like, I think he's gonna be really good, and the cast in this is just absolutely ridiculous. Nolan also praised Matt Damon as a creative partner, and Christopher Nolan calls the Odyssey a nightmare to film and shooting on a variety of natural settings and weather conditions with the difficult to manage very heavy IMAX cameras and reels, right? So he had a real struggle on this film, but he's like, it was all worth it. I'm really curious to see the Agamemnon, who I think is played by Benny Safdie, but he has this big black mohawk and like this golden armor with black, and he just looks like he's gonna be the villain of this movie, but he looks very intimidating and badass. Love to see that. Can't wait to see more of the Odyssey, and that should be coming out fairly soon, I think. Ben Stiller then hit the stage to talk about Fokker-in-Law, as they're back with another Fokker movie. And he's like, yeah, 15 years later was always the plan. But he says, when we made the first one, Robert De Niro was 57 years old. And today, I'm approximately 57 years old. So, you know, now they've gone through this whole journey where Ben's now just as old as Robert was when they filmed the first one. Now Robert's in his 80s or whatever. But this film seems to have Ben Stiller, of course, returning as the Fokker. Robert De Niro's character obviously returning, and they were like the son that initially got married into the family, and he was like the crazy father-in-law. But now it looks like Ariana Grande's character is marrying into Ben Stiller's family, and she's going to be marrying Skylar Gisondo, who is, you know, Jimmy Olsen from Superman, James Gunn's Superman. So he's like Ben Stiller's son, and Ariana Grande's like a FBI investigator, just kind of like how De Niro's character was a CIA investigator, and they're now all three of them going to be in this movie, and it's coming Thanksgiving of this year, I believe. So that's kind of exciting, and that's going to be, what, the fourth movie in this series, with Meet the Parents being the first one, Meet the Fockers with the second one, adding in, what, Sean Penn there, or whoever that is, or I know his name, I just said Sean Penn, but what is his name? Oh, that's going to bug me. But then Little Fockers was the most recent one, but that was still like 15 years ago, so De Niro's aged quite a bit from now to then, you know. And apparently Ben Stiller and De Niro were really funny on stage, and Ben Stiller was comparing how this was Raging Bull was his Madagascar, and De Niro was like, I prefer the one with the minions, you know, so shitting on him a little bit, but both being funny on stage. Ben Stiller, when he came out, he was like, I'm Ben Stiller, I'm the one actor not in the Odyssey, and that was something that Christopher Nolan had said before this panel, and he was like, you know, walked out on stage, and instead of introducing everybody that was in the Odyssey, he was like, it would be easier to tell you who's not in this film. But, you know, Ben Stiller just capitalizing as a comedic genius just to hear that line and think it was funny and walk out and go, I'm the one actor who wasn't in the Odyssey. And he kind of looks at Christopher Nolan like, hey brother, you didn't give me a call? What the fuck? The crowd then saw trailers for Violent Night 2 with Santa being David Harbour. And Santa is barely feeling like Santa and working at a mall, and chaos ensues, including a gingerbread man cookie cutter yanking a chunk of man out. And then Kristen Bell is a badass Mrs. Claus, and it looks wild and fun. David Harbour returning for a bloody night for Violent Night 2, you know, and I quite like David Harbour in Violent Night 1, so maybe we'll get to know more of how this Viking guy became Santa. They then brought Steven Spielberg out on stage to discuss Disclosure Day, and they got a standing ovation, of course. And Steven Spielberg reflects and recalls how he used to be in the exhibit business as a kid in Arizona by renting movies and playing them in his family living room, charging kids in the neighborhood 10 cents, as it's legal to do so if those proceedings go to charity. But he said he would turn the profit by charging 12 cents for popcorn. So Spielberg's been a part of these movie shit since he was a kid, but he's also been fascinated by UFOs for so long. And he discusses the history of UFOs, how a pilot in 1947 named Kenneth Arnold spotted a saucer flying past his plane, and in the same year, mysterious debris was discovered in Roswell, New Mexico. According to Spielberg, most Hollywood films in the decades since depicted alien encounters without actually believing aliens were out there. In recent years, smartphones and intelligence disclosures of infrared scans from a Navy pilot's reignited his interest and belief in UAPs. To Spielberg, this is not fiction or his imaginative fears. He truly believes we are not alone in this world. The true belief in what Disclosure Day is about. There's more truth than fiction in this film. Oh my goodness. So Disclosure Day is going to drop, and then we're going to get alien sightings just at Spielberg's house being like, hey, you're not allowed to tell stories about us this truthfully. Stop it. And they're going to be like, oh, my bad. You know, like, Jesus Christ. And apparently there's a whole nother trailer shown for Disclosure Day at this CinemaCon event, and from the trailers I've seen, it looks fantastic, and I can't wait for yet another trailer to drop online. But I think Disclosure Day comes out like fairly soon, so maybe we won't have to wait too long, and we'll be able to feast our eyes on this film on the big screen and have a UFO Steven Spielberg movie back in the works. You know, and maybe it's vaguely connected to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you know, and that was like one of the first alien movies I think he did, you know, even before E.T. I think. And Close Encounters is a phenomenal movie and one of my favorite alien movies, so, you know, maybe I'll have to give that a rewatch right before going into Disclosure Day. And that wrapped up the Universal panel, but then they had an Amazon MGM panel that wasn't too long, and it kicked off with the Thomas Crown Affair, which is starring Michael B. Jordan and Adria Arjona, who he called his new DC superhero. So hero, maybe she is not Maximum, and maybe she is Wonder Woman. But in talking about the film, Michael B. Jordan talks about watching the 1999 film starring Pierce Brosnan. And Michael B. Jordan jokes that he was too young to watch the whole thing back in, you know, the Thomas Crown Affair in '99 back in the day. But then he discovered the 1968 Steve McQueen original and loved both. And I've been dreaming of making this movie for years. Right, so this seems like something he's directing maybe, and also, you know, producing and starring in the Thomas Crown Affair. But I didn't realize that the Thomas Crown Affair was not only a 1999 film starring Pierce Brosnan, that already interests me just from that name, but then '68 Steve McQueen did the original version of the Thomas Crown Affair. Freaking anybody that's seen those films, drop it down below. I need to go see those. And Michael B. Jordan was also introduced as Oscar winner Michael B. Jordan. He's like, oh, that's never gonna get old. And this is like one of the first times that he's introduced as now Oscar winner, now at his first public event since the Oscars. And he's like, oh yeah, that's gonna be nice for the rest of his life. Oscar winner Michael B. Jordan. Hell yeah. But Michael B. Jordan and Adria Arjona open up the teaser speaking directly to each other, and this is the footage for Thomas Crown Affair and the description from Brandon Davis here. And it says that they open up speaking directly to each other, but feeling like they're speaking right through us as a viewer. She thinks he's fractured and has commitment issues. He looks sick. He drives an iconic red sports car, 80s, 90s looking, with a big spoiler and admires art while also heisting it. And he dresses in a tux while carrying out a heist, sometimes vanishing off the ground in wires, and in other setting we see Adria getting up to him and to proclaim, "This is how you like it, right? Right here." Michael B. Jordan introduces himself as to Kenneth Branagh's angry character as Thomas Crown. Thomas is a fan of Adria's heists and compliments how she's stolen so many impressive paintings. Michael B. Jordan is shirtless and sweaty, working out in golden hour looking shot, and Adria's in a thin bikini jumping off a cliff, and the movie isn't afraid to lean into sexiness of these two. Awesome, love to see it. Branagh's character then tells Michael B. Jordan over at a dinner table that he will continue to buy and sell men like him. While we see dance moves, race crashes, Climbing up the side of a building in more action beats, Michael B. Jordan declares that he has never known men like him. After the footage, Michael B. Jordan and Adria discuss the movie and show love to each other in the film, while also detailing it filmed for IMAX. Great chemistry and presence on stage, phenomenal looking movie. March of 2027 is when that's coming. So, and many of people said that the Thomas Crown Affair was some of the best footage from the weekend. But after this, Ryan Gosling then got announced on stage to talk about the theatrical window of Project Hail Mary getting extended, and also to celebrate the movie just crossing 525 million globally, which is very exciting for them. And Gosling shouts out cities around the world and thanks theater owners and literally gave him their flowers for distributing the movie. And Gosling gave a thank you note to a woman in the crowd, and everyone is passing it around to read it. But good that Project Hail Mary is getting an extended window, as it should, because that movie was really good. If you haven't seen Project Hail Mary, I sincerely recommend going to the biggest screen possible to watch it. And the biggest thing from Amazon MGM was people thinking that the next James Bond was going to be announced. They just saw Denis Villeneuve on stage the previous day talking about Dune Part 3, so they were like, oh, he's in Vegas, maybe we'll see him talking about who the next Bond will be, and that will get announced. But Amazon MGM acknowledged the James Bond casting hunt, and the quote says, "We're taking time to do this with care and deep respect. It's the dream of a lifetime for all of us to bring audiences the next chapter. What I can tell you is this: when you pair one of the most beloved franchises in history with a world-class filmmaking team, especially with director Denis Villeneuve, extraordinary producers, and amazing screenwriter Stephen Knight, you're setting the stage for something that is truly worth the Bond legacy." So, no news on Bond yet, but they are diligently working away with Stephen Knight screenwriting, Denis producing and directing, it seems, and yeah, I can't wait to find out more about Bond, but no official Bond updates. Still a big old question mark over who the next James Bond will be. Then after this, they had a Highlander presentation with Chad Stahelski, who I believe is the John Wick director and stunt guy back in the day. And Chad Stahelski's directing Highlander, starring Henry Cavill in the role in this new reboot of Highlander, which I think was a thing back in the day, but this is a new version. He's like in a trench coat. He almost looks like the Punisher in some of the set photos I saw from this. So that looks cool. And then they think they ended the Amazon MGM third day panel with the Spaceballs panel, and they had Spaceballs 2, the next one. They had a clip from Mel Brooks, I believe. They had Rick Moranis on stage. Just awesome. I'm not the biggest fan of Spaceballs 1, but I do love, you know, John Candy, Bill Pullman. I love Mel Brooks. I love Rick Moranis. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Absolutely grew up on that. I think he did another movie called Flubber. I could be wrong though. Or Goop or something like that. It was like a green blob that kept bouncing around. But yeah, Rick Moranis was one of those guys that he should have been around for this whole time, but he had to do his own thing, and if you guys know, you know why. But Rick Moranis, the legend you are, absolutely love you. Shout out to Rick Moranis. And anybody that's a Spaceballs fan, comment below. Are you gonna go see that when that comes out in, I think, next year? But then day 4 of CinemaCon kicked off with Paramount and Disney, and Paramount had it like earlier in the day, and then they had a big old Disney panel to end it. But the Street Fighter cast, I believe, was there, and there was 2 new posters for Street Fighter, and I believe these are, you know, Gael, friggin' Cody Rhodes is on here. I see a UFC guy up there in the top left. Ryu with a fireball. I think that's Chun-Li in the middle. Maybe Ken on the right. Andrew Santino there as well, I see. But then there was also a second poster because they couldn't fit all these guys on one poster, or maybe it will be like 2 different teams going up against each other. But on this one I see Jason Momoa's Blanca in the center there. Right above him you got Roman Reigns, also has a crazy powerful Akuma, I believe, but you can see his big old beads he's got around his neck. A couple more sexy women over his shoulders. Eric Andre, I believe that's David Dalsmalchian's M. Bison up top. And then there's a guy with a white mask, or maybe that's a girl, I don't know. But then there's a big old Russian with a mohawk maybe, and then Balrog, freaking 50 Cent getting jacked as hell right up front. And this is hitting theaters October 16th. But the trailer that got released the other day for this looked so good. But then, you know, also at the same time, I'm like thinking the only thing I could possibly think about seeing this was Mortal Kombat 2. And I was like seeing trailers for that as well. And I was like, wait, Mortal Kombat 2 has to be coming out soon as well. That comes out May 8th, so that's almost right around the corner. So I can't wait to go to theaters to see that. But at the same time, don't you kind of wish that Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat 2 were in theaters at the exact same time? I know I do, because I would literally go do like a Barbenheimer double feature of these two fighting movies. But it's still kind of cool that in the same year we'll get two different badass fighting movies with Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat 2. Yeah, can't wait. Paramount then quickly went through a bunch of things. They showed footage of the new Scary Movie 2026 that's coming out, and that brought the house down apparently. They then announced Call of Duty is getting a movie, and that's coming June 30th, 2028. They then had James Cameron and Billie Eilish on stage talking about her concert film, Hit Me Hard and Soft. So, you know, same way like Taylor Swift a couple years had a concert film, it looks like Billie Eilish got legendary director James Cameron to do her. So why he agreed to do that, who knows, but apparently he's having a good time, so fuck it, James Cameron. Billie Eilish, why not? It was also said that World War Z is confirmed. A new World War Z is going to be happening. And then also, there is a follow-up to Top Gun Maverick in works at Paramount, and a script is underway, and Tom Cruise will be returning. So that's some breaking new news from Paramount. And they also then, I believe, finished their panel, or maybe this was the start of the Disney panel, because it's a Christmas Carol, but either way, Ebenezer, A Christmas Carol, starring Johnny Depp as Ebenezer Scrooge in T. West's adaptation of Dickens' classic, coming November 13th, 2026. So that's coming this year, Ebenezer. That's interesting, around Christmas time. And the footage shows Ian McKellen as the forlorn ghost Jacob Marley, in a pretty cool shot of the ghost of Christmas Future opening his cloak to show hands of people imprisoned in his ribcage. Interesting. Ew. So this should be like a darker, creepier Christmas Carol? It's also got Johnny Depp, doing his Jack Sparrow comedy antics and, being Scrooge. So that should be interesting to see Johnny Depp returning to the big screen as Scrooge. But then Walt Disney Studios was up, and they started off their panel, and they showed like this image that had the different branches that will be included in this Disney panel, with Disney, Walt Disney Animation Studios, Marvel Studios, Pixar, which Walt Disney Animation Studios showed Zootopia 2, and then Pixar shows Toy Story. You could have fooled me. I would have thought that Zootopia was 100% Pixar, but apparently not. But also in that Marvel Studios little banner there, they show a look at what Doctor Doom will look like. This is an official image now of what Doctor Doom might look like, unless this is just a like stock photo, but I don't know. I think this is a pretty confirmed look of how he's gonna look in the movie, which is kind of exciting. Lucasfilm, 20th Century Fox, and Searchlight Pictures as well will be in this little panel here. So jumping on into it, Disney was on stage and they talked about their box office successes from the last year and all their films that made over $1 billion, with Moana 2 making $1 billion, Deadpool and Wolverine making 1.3, Inside Out 2 making 1.9, Lilo and Stitch making $1 billion, Zootopia 2 making 1.9 billion, which is a crazy stat that's the movie that has the most box office here. And then Avatar 3 made $1.5 billion. So Avatar still just racking in billions of dollars, just being a super successful film and a film franchise for them. And James Cameron just calculating money, just, oh, I made a film, give me $1 billion, please. Like, Jesus Christ. In the upcoming slate coming from Disney will be The Devil's Wear Prada 2 coming May 1st, Mandalorian and Grogu May 22nd, Toy Story 5 June 19th, Moana live action coming July 10th, Super Troopers 3 coming August 9th. I don't know if I've ever seen Super Troopers. Any fans out there, let me know what that is. The Dog Stars coming August 28th. Whale Fall, which is a movie that people were definitely talking about from this presentation, October 16th. Wild Horse 9, November 6th. Hexed, November 25th. Avengers Doomsday will end out the year, December 18th, and then to start out 2027, Ice Age Boiling Point will be February 5th, 2 days after my 28th birthday, February 5th, 2027, and then Gato, March 5th, 2027. I think that's about a cat. But either way, they then kick off their panel with The Mandalorian and Grogu, and that's like how they're going to go through these, if you want to skip ahead to anything, I guess. But Jon Favreau was on stage talking about The Mandalorian and Grogu, and I think they got to see like the first 15 or first 17 minutes of the film or something like that in the room. But they also released a Mandalorian and Grogu trailer out online at the same time, and that trailer I already broke down and reacted to last Friday, so go check out that final Mandalorian and Grogu trailer breakdown and reaction out now on the channel. I really appreciate all those Star Wars fans out there. So Jon Favreau talking about his memories of working with Mandalorian and Grogu, and he said that he only got to direct one episode of the series, but now he got to direct this whole movie. And he hopes that all their love and joy for Star Wars translates to the new generation of fans. And 49 minutes of the film was filmed for IMAX, and he debuted a new trailer, which will be online today, which was out last Friday. And he concluded the portion of this show with showing the entire audience 15 minutes of the movie, the first 15. So, you know, crowds were going absolutely nuts about this. And I have Eric Voss's breakdown and you know, synopsis of what these first 15 minutes are. And he says that Din Djarin and Grogu raid a facility on a snowy world overtaken by an Imperial warlord who cracks down on local leaders. Din shoots his way through stormtroopers and then chases down the warlord on his caravan of AT-ATs. So those AT-AT walkers were all just a Imperial warlord that he's tracking down. That's interesting. And the action is smooth and fun, and Mando uses all of the weaponry at his disposal, and seemingly nothing can bring him down. After the credits, we see Din return to Sigourney Weaver's Colonel Ward, apparently. She's like the captain of this rebel squadron, or, you know, X-Wing team. But back on the whatever, it's fake fictional Star Wars planet, El Delphi base, who goes gives him a new assignment in a new version of the Razor Crest. And he says, if you love The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, this feels like a very enjoyable, high-budget, big-scale episode. I don't say that to diss the movie. It's just the Disney Plus series was already on a high bar of production value. We still don't know the full plot and what will make this story a movie, but in general, it looks really good. So if Boss appreciates the first 15 minutes and is, you know, open mind to what the rest of this movie is going to look like, but also somebody like Eric Voss not knowing what this whole movie is going to look like, and we're almost there. Like, we're less than, you know, we're almost a month out. I think it's May 22nd. Today's, you know, 420. 420, all my stoners out there. But, you know, this seems like it's going to be a very, very good movie to me. You know, I am very here from The Mandalorian and Grogu. I want to hang out with these characters more. And the fact that we get to do this in a 2-hour movie and we get Star Wars back on a big screen just feels so freaking correct, and I love it so much. But then for Disney, they brought out The Rock on stage to talk about Moana, and he was talking about how his father was a chief and that inspired Moana and that type of stuff. So he's very personal to this project. But, you know, pulling some double duty this weekend, did Jumanji with Kevin Hart and Jack Black, but now he's also doing Moana for Disney. They then showed a little segment for The Dog Stars, which is coming to theaters August 28th, and this apparently is directed by Ridley Scott, which I haven't heard anything about this film. This was the first I'm hearing of it. But Ridley Scott's The Dog Stars, which then stars Jacob Elordi, coming off of his work as the Frankenstein's monster. Margaret Qualley's also in there, Josh Brolin and Guy Pearce, and then a dog, apparently. You know, so they look to be in like almost like a Last of Us setting, where like this looks like a post-apocalyptic city type of thing, and they have guns and this dog, and I don't know what it's about other than that, but I'm kind of interested in the cast, and Ridley Scott makes pretty damn good movies, so I guess I'm here for it. I guess we'll find out more eventually. They then showed footage for a movie called Whale Fall, and many in the room described it as literally breathtaking footage, and it's actually insane. And this is what BD had to say about the footage. And the footage is set underwater, sub-diving deep into darkness. A thump alerts the diver, calling attention to an approaching squad, which ultimately zips away mysteriously, running from something below. Below is just darkness and an encroaching ticking, a whale rising head first and slowly passes by the diver, not paying any mind to him. The diver sees the whale vanish into the darkness, further water, and rises up himself, only for fish to start blowing past him and the squad to emerge as fleeing. The whale zips past him and tumbling him into a large bed of seaweed. It ultimately sees the diver tied up with the squad and pulled through the deep sea by the whale, only to end up in its mouth with the squid holding onto the diver to avoid being swallowed whole, ultimately pulling him in. It's dark and claustrophobic and terrifying. The whale's mouth is open the whole time as the diver fights for his life, ultimately seeing the squid get swallowed, but now being stuck in the whale's mouth, and its tongue turns to the man and pulls him too, swallowing him whole. Jesus Christ. So Whale Fall is this movie with this guy who's a scuba diver, and he's like gets attacked by a squid or something, it seems like, and then a whale swallows a squid and him whole. So it's like some Moby Dick Pinocchio type shit, and he's in the stomach of this whale. Oh my goodness. And like, not only is this terrifying, it also sounds pretty interesting. It's real. Like, there's real footage out there of guys getting swallowed by whales scuba diving, just like in the ocean, and this massive fish comes out of nowhere and just like swallows you. What the fuck? Like, I don't like the ocean as is. Like, I like it, but I'm not going deep, you know? Like, I stay on the shore. But my goodness, this makes me not want to go in water. Or, you know, like, I've always wanted to try scuba diving. This makes me want to do it in a pool. Like, fuck that. I am not going to the ocean ever. There's aliens, there's weird sharks, there's fishes. No thanks. The next panel after this, they switch gears a little bit to a animated film called Hex, or Hexed, Hex with ED at the end, Hexed, and this will be a witch movie starring a young teenage witch voiced by Haley Steinfeld, and her mother will be voiced by Rashida Jones. So that should be interesting, and yeah, nothing too much else to say about that one. But then they finished their initial panel here with Ice Age Boiling Point, and they had Queen Latifah, Ray Romano, and Dennis Leary on stage, of course, as the, female mammoth, the Mammoth Manny, and Diego. John Leguizamo nowhere to be found as Sid, but maybe he's problematic. But apparently in this Ice Age Boiling Point footage, we see them bringing back Scrat and introducing Baby Scrat. And the footage shows Baby Scrat feuding with Scrat over an acorn and ultimately sucking on a very small one like a pacifier. But Scrat pounces on the acorn, but a volcanic eruption is triggered in his acorn, which was lodged in a snowy ice, developed a fiery glow before melting below them. So this is the boiling point, I guess. And Scrat goes on a journey to keep his nuts safe, riding it through lava, bouncing around as they fall into pits through bones, and Baby Scrat is unscathed in the journey. Okay, so Baby Scrat doesn't get hurt. It ends with Scrat catching the nut, and it turns into ash and gets punted away in frustration, only to hit a dinosaur skull, which falls into the lava and generates a fiery splash, and it's all set up in the background music tune of Fireball, and it looks fun. But then it was Marvel Studios' turn, and Marvel was on stage, of course, and they started their panel by, you know, having the Marvel Studios poster up, but then they go 17 years, 37 films, $33 billion. Wow. Now, granted, there are some films in there that weren't hits, right? Like, that only made a couple $100 million. But for every one of those, you know, there's like a Spider-Man No Way Home, and that made a couple billion, you know, and Deadpool Wolverine made $1 billion plus, you know, so each one of those $1 billion plus then helps another one of these movies. But they're almost $1 billion per movie. 37 films, $33 billion. So you're telling me 4 of their films at that calculation, 4 films haven't made $1 billion. Like, that is so much fucking money. But it also sounds so tone deaf, right? Like, Marvel, like Disney just talking about, oh, we had 5, 6 films make $1 billion plus. Oh, Zootopia 2 made almost $2 billion. Marvel made $33 billion in 17 years. Good for us. But we also just laid off 1,000 people and all of our creatives and people that like did great concept artwork for them that is on artwork in the studios, and they're getting fired in like absolutely crazy and kind of tone deaf that they did like, oh, we're making so much money, we're good for theaters but bad for our own employees. Like, what? Come on, Marvel, come on, Disney, you guys are fucked up. They also announced Infinity Vision, which will be what I understand like a maybe rival to like IMAX, but maybe not exactly. I think it will just be more of like a, as Eric Voss described, as like a directory to like find the biggest screens possible that are available, and it doesn't have to be in IMAX, you know, like there's great Dolby screens out there and other stuff, you know, so maybe this Infinity Vision will just be a certification at theaters for them to be able to say, hey, we classify in all the things that Marvel wants us to do for Infinity Vision, we classify so you can come see your film here. Hey, you know, like maybe that's what it is, and they're trying to have some type of competition there with Dune Part 3 and IMAX is the reason for that, but I'm not sure. But then it was Avengers Doomsday time, and Kevin Feige walked out on stage and he confirmed that Avengers Endgame will be re-released in September, and it will have surprises added to it and will be released with this new Infinity Vision system, right? So that will like kick it off in September, and then by December they'll have Infinity Vision screens for us to be able to go to or whatnot, or I don't know. But Avengers Doomsday picks up right where Endgame left off and also gets back the X-Men, right? So the not just like any X-Men, the same X-Men from before, and they're gonna fulfill the promise to have the X-Men and the Avengers on the same screen at the same time, which is, I feel like, what a lot of people want, so that's good. Also interesting that like this Infinity Vision seems weird to me, but either way, Endgame getting re-released in September with new surprises and new footage being shown, that's exciting. And then Kevin Feige brought the Russo brothers out, and then they brought out Robert Downey Jr., of course, Dr. Doom, and then they showed the official Avengers Doomsday trailer to the people in the room at CinemaCon, and like yet to release online, yet people are still clamoring and really want it. Hopefully at some point this week that Avengers Doomsday trailer drops, and we're not talking those 4 little teaser trailers for, you know, Steve Rogers, Thor, the X-Men, and the Wakandans and the Fantastic Four. We're not talking about those teasers from, you know, back when Avatar Fire and Ash was in theaters in December. This is an official trailer showing the first official look at Dr. Doom and how he looks in costume. They didn't show his face, but you know how he looks as a character. They showed a ton of footage, and I have, you know, the description breakdown here from Eric Voss, and he says, yes, the Avengers Doomsday trailer lives up to the hype. We saw a 2-minute trailer, it holds nothing back. Professor X reacts to an explosion outside the window of the X mansion. We hear Downey's accented voice as Victor Von Doom warning of an impending doom and saying they'll need to make an unthinkable decision. They then see Dr. Doom armored with his mask on, making a superhero landing in a courtyard, like on a knee and like looking up, kind of sick. Most of the action is in the X mansion. Channing Tatum as Gambit fights Shang-Chi, which, what? Like, Shang-Chi is in this movie fighting Gambit? What? What? So sick. They then show Mystique shape-shifting into Yelena and then fights the real Florence Pugh. So Florence Pugh versus Florence Pugh. Plus we get the legit Mystique, and it's said that she has her white comic books outfit on. She's not just naked like in the previous movies. So, you know, that's got to be a plus for Rebecca Romijn as well. But, you know, so glad that Mystique's back. I mean, like, the shapeshifters with the Skrulls were cool, but nobody shapeshifted as cool as Mystique has ever done it, you know? It also says that Thor leads the Avengers in a speech to settle their differences. We see Avengers Tower with the new Avengers logo on it, and the building has a new different shape at the top. A desert landscape from the 4th teaser of the Wakandans and the Namor, Talokan, and the Fantastic Four. And the desert landscape we saw has is the bottom of the ocean, maybe, and the ocean is parted and is surrounding them. So maybe this is by Namor, and like he writes Moses style, where the F4 meet the Wakandans. But I don't think this is Namor pushing back the water. Maybe this is like Battle World, and like the edges of Battle World are these water, you know, borders. maybe it's Doctor Doom rather than Namor, or maybe it's Storm. Maybe it's not Sue Storm. Maybe it's Aurora Monroe Storm. And Thor says, "We need a miracle," and Mjolnir goes into Steve Rogers' hands, and he has long hair, and he doesn't have quite the same look as in the previous trailer as we saw, but so much more, and he will break down in a video coming later tonight. And if you want to see a very, very good breakdown of somebody that got to see this in room, go to New Rockstars and watch Eric Voss's breakdown of this Avengers Doomsday trailer. And like, obviously it's not a breakdown of it because we don't have the footage yet, but he is breaking down what he saw and describing it for all of us. And it's just so cool that this trailer got released at CinemaCon. I really wish I was in the room, but after they released it, they then brought out Chris Evans on stage, which I thought was a really good touch. And I was like, oh, they got the band back together. And I thought it was funny. Chris Evans is on stage talking to RDJ, and he's like, this Doctor Doom guy, I don't like him. I don't like him, and this is, if anyone knows Chris Evans memes, this is like a meme from back in the day, I don't like it, I don't like it, I don't like it, but I love that, like, Joe Russo is separating them, and he's like, oh, you two, we'll save the fighting for the movie, would you? But they look like they're very happy together, I don't know who the guy is far left, but friggin' this Getty image of Feige, the Russo brothers, and then Downey and Chris Evans, and Downey and Chris Evans both have their green on, of course, for Doomsday, but whew, man, I gotta see this trailer. It gotta drop soon. But there was also a little footage from the room of the countdown clock, and it's now at 8 months, 1 day, 6 hours, 17 minutes, and 54 seconds, and counting as they ended their panel. But man, oh man, I also have Brandon Davis's description of what happened here, and he says, "We see Xavier's school sign in the ground. A narrator says, something's coming, something we may not be able to deter. Xavier sees flames coming from the sky out of his window, looks genuinely scared. Dr. Doom is the one who's presumably been narrating, and he seems to have a slight accent, and we see him start to rise in another setting, in hood and mask on, so he like rises up his head. The new Avengers Tower with the new A logo is seen. The building is updated and has 3 spires on it. The Fantastic Four meet Bucky, Ant-Man, Captain America, and more in that building. Interesting. We hear Thor telling stories of his people dying and how the threat scares him more than anything before, and he narrates the rest of the trailer with this quote, "I have fought with many warriors in my time. They were far stronger than any of us combined, and they died. They died facing enemies and threats that scared me far less than this one. Everything that was sacrificed will be for nothing if we do not stand together. If you return, you will return as brothers and sisters, but mark my words, we are going to need a miracle." Oof. Ooh, so it looks like they're returning Thor to like this leader, King Thor maybe, with like this Shakespearean-esque speeches. Like he's back. He's not Fat Thor. He's not the butt of the joke in Endgame anymore. He's back as a legit god. And it seems like maybe Doctor Doom scares him and maybe took his child or something, and that is going to infuriate Thor. Who knows? But I am totally here for this. But then BD finishes out his little description here by saying, Cyclops is seen in a new shot. Gambit fights Shang-Chi, both using their powers, and it looks epic in like a dance. The Fantastic Four meets Wakandans in a desert made because water has been forced away, surrounding them like giant walls. Yelena matches past a concerned Reed Richards. She literally fights herself, and we see Yelena was Mystique. Thor's speech is still going. Thor smashes Stormbreaker at Doctor Doom, who simply catches Stormbreaker with one hand. He emphasizes, "We're going to need a miracle to conclude his speech." "Hey pal," is heard from someone off screen aboard the Fantastic Four ship. It is Steve Rogers, complete with long hair and a beard, and leaving Thor in disbelief. And Steve raises his hand and pulling Stormbreaker from Thor's hand, but I that might be wrong. I heard that it was Mjolnir and Stormbreaker isn't seen from this point on. So Steve pulls Mjolnir from Thor's hand, catching it with a grin, and that's like all they show. And I think that was the end of the Avengers Doomsday trailer, which I think looks sounds amazing, and I can't not wait to feast my eyes on this Avengers Doomsday trailer. Hopefully it's out like tomorrow or something, and then there will be a breakdown for that on the channel, and just reacting and just feasting my eyes. And oh, I cannot wait, man. Just from the people in the room, like, the social media went crazy, and it was going crazy over descriptions of this trailer. Not the like, think about how much hype has to be around what's going on in a room if what they're seeing is blowing up the world and the rest of the world hasn't seen it. You know what I mean? Like, they're all like, we're blowing up over people's words describing the trailer. Now, some people are like, this is bullshit. Why aren't they releasing the trailer? Why am I not in the room? And they're like either just pure jealousy or they're just dumb. And they're like, why is this happening? Now, hearing the description of this footage, is that spoilery? Maybe. For some folks, maybe they don't want to hear this type of stuff. For me, this does nothing but make me excited to see it for myself, right? Because there's still a part of me that doesn't believe what they're saying, right? Like, my soul, like my brain and my heart loves the fact that Gambit and Shang-Chi are fighting in this trailer. But like, my soul doesn't believe it until I see it. You know what I mean? I'm like, nah, that sounds cool, but it you know, I'm a don't count your eggs until they hatch type of guy, you know? So, I don't know. I really don't know. I think this is going to be really cool, but it also could be just batshit crazy too, you know? But, and I can't believe they held strong that they are staying on December 18th, the same day as Dune Part 3, and they're not moving. You know, that's crazy. But that's it from CinemaCon, and that was that happened Monday to Thursday last week, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was kind of pooped just from like hearing about all this information. But then Saturday, Sunday night, the WrestleMania was happening in Las Vegas as well, so that was kind of hyped. Brock Lesnar, for anybody that's wrestling fans out there, Brock Lesnar retired and when he got beat by Obafemi. So hopefully Obafemi's going to be a beast going forward. I'm glad that Liv beat, you know, Stephanie, even though I love Stephanie Vaquer. Liv now is champion. Rhea is now champion, so that should be fun. Cody Rhodes probably should have lost to Randy Orton, and the whole Pat McAfee thing sucked, but CM Punk losing to Roman Reigns in that final match on Sunday night was really, really good. But I think the best thing that happened at WrestleMania weekend was that Danhausen bit with John Cena. If you guys know, you know. I absolutely loved it, and any WrestleMania fans out there, chat to me. Especially if you made it this far in the video, I highly appreciate you, and I'd love to chat more wrestling with you. But anybody that made it this far, I highly appreciate anybody that clicked on this video for the information or just to hear my thoughts about this information. And, you know, CinemaCon 2026 seemed to be a huge event. You know, we got Sony, Spider-Man Brand New Day, Beyond the Spider-Verse, Godzilla -0, Lord of the Rings, Hunt for Gollum news. We got Supergirl, Dune Part 3, a potential AEGONS Conquest movie coming in the future. Then the next day for Universal, the Odyssey, Father-in-Law. There was also Disclosure Day, maybe some Amazon news for the new Bond coming soon, maybe Highlander, Spaceballs, Street Fighter with Paramount, and then Disney, of course, with Star Wars, Mandalorian and Grogu, a bunch of other stuff, Moana, Dog Stars, and then Marvel really sticking the landing here with Avengers Doomsday. I would have loved to be in the room for this, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. Maybe one day in the future. You know, I think it's more of an invite-only type of thing for people in the industry and press. So who knows, maybe one day this channel will be big enough to get my ass over to Vegas for CinemaCon, and I will be the one in the room reporting back to y'all. You know, that would be fun. But, you know, that's down the road. That's some future, so maybe we'll manifest that if we could. But until next year, I'll talk more CinemaCon with y'all then, and hopefully some more trailers that were released at these events get released to the public this week, and we can have some breakdowns for that on the channel. But if you've made it this far, comment below all of your thoughts, or you can send them to me to my other social medias. Links for those down in the description below. Big Cam, 2 G's in the big, pretty much anywhere, and you can find me. But if you made it this far into the video and you would like to support the channel, the best way of doing that is smashing a like on this video, commenting down below, subscribing if you haven't already, and hit that bell so you don't miss future Comically Boston Weekly Nerdy News podcast. I know this is a very long one. I'm so sorry for y'all. I'm going to try and edit it down to as tight as possible, but there was a lot of information to talk about this week, so hopefully you guys watch this video and enjoy it. But some more movie reviews coming out this week as well. Daredevil Born Again Season 2 Episode 6 breakdown. So yeah, more stuff coming this week and more trailer breakdowns when those come out. Once again, my name's Big Cam, and I'll see you gorgeous folks in the next video. Peace.